I think it's fair time to finally admit that the reason why Ultramodern 5 was able to come out as soon as it did, way ahead of other modern or sci-fi adaptations of 5th edition, was that Deus Ex Machina had access to what is known as the alpha or the friends and family playtest of 5th edition, one of the benefits of having connections. While we were testing the game, a heated conversation began to develop over the control of dice, who rolls what, and why. Some people insist that random elements in gaming are vital to its enjoyment factor. Not only that, but who controls that element of chance is also important. Role-playing games at their core involve the interrelationship between static values and dice rolling, with some games promoting more rolling than others. West End D6 system had virtually no static values. The attributes were listed as dice rolls, so strength could be expressed as 3d6 plus 2. Each time you needed to roll for a strength check, you would roll these dice and compare the result with a target value. Amber involved no dice rolling whatsoever. D&D embraced a common middle ground of fixed values and dice rolling. What you were was static, but what you did was not. Rolling dice is vital to ensuring chance in gaming, of having the possibility of failure, even though players will do everything in their power, even to the extent of embracing superstition, to increase their probability at winning. I have seen players throw dice across a room in frustration after a string of bad results. Some have lucky dice they keep in separate containers. There was even a study which showed that players tend to roll dice gently when the result is required to be low, and vigorously when the result is required to be high. I had one friend that joked that in order to acquire high attribute values for his character, it necessitated him rolling like a waterfall, resulting in ridicule from the group when another player didn't follow these exact instructions. How someone rolls is not what concerns me of late. It's about why we roll, who rolls, and how often we do so. This is somewhat connected to the psychological quirks listed above, because despite dice being unemotional, non-magical, inanimate aspects of chance, players still insist on being in control of dice. Who rolls shouldn't matter unless you introduce the possibility of cheating. Yet show me a player that would prefer someone else make his attack roll. Rolling dice makes the player believe he is actually contributing to combat beyond his presence of character. The GM is handling combat. Dice rolling is often the only ways a player can control his own fate, even when he actually isn't. Tabletop games are known for their prevalence of dice rolling, more often because of their dependency on the limited variability of the D6. Warhammer is one such game where hundreds of dice are rolled in the span of a 1 hour game. Sure, toughness and power values are fixed, but attack rolls are still made for each unit, and said unit can often be required to make an armor save. I remember rolling 60 d6s when a squad of Hormagaunts assaulted a line of Tau warriors. The Gaunts scored a hit on a 5+, wounding on a 4+, so of the 60 dice, 25 of them would come up with a hit. Those were re-rolled with 13 coming up with a wound. The dozen warriors then rolled their 5+ save, and 5 survived. That's a lot of dice rolling for amounts to 2 minutes of combat. Thankfully, the system is built so that determining hits and wounds are easy. Factor hit points and alternate defensive values, and suddenly it takes a whole lot longer. The time to finish a battle in an RPG is expected to be minutes, not hours, so role-playing games have made attempts to shorten this. One way is to simplify how damage is inflicted, singular hit points rather than hit location charts. The other is to reduce the number of dice being rolled. D&D has maintained the age and stalwart armor class, a fixed value enemies are required to hit to inflict damage. Although some players still prefer the variable defense system, like the one found in our Talzorian games, Mechta and Cyberpunk, many have embraced the concept of fixed defenses. Fixed damage values are less common, especially with games with large hit point values. The predominant trend with all these games, both RPGs and tabletop, is to place the responsibility of dice rolling in the hands of the attacker and not the target. If the attacker has 6 attacks, why does the target have to be the one laden with rolling that many times? You might think this is a common assumption, but there is one noteworthy exception. D&D spells. Despite the rules regarding melee ranged attacks, almost every edition of D&D has employed an opposite mechanic with spells. If a wizard casts a spell, he sets a fixed value and the targets have to all make saving throws. A wizard doesn't roll any dice, but neither does he have to waste time or energy doing it. And people, especially gamers, are all about moving quickly with the least amount of energy. I had a player that would roll his attack and damage dice with the same throw, stating that he wanted to save time during the game. This same player was laden with numerous complaints during our last game when he was playing a wizard, forcing the game to grind to a halt whenever he cast a spell. Was he slow? No. But each time he cast a fireball, the GM, meaning me, would have to roll a save for each target. Then I had to adjust the hit points for those targets, full damage for fails and half damage for successes, Already dealing with the numerous opponents in combat, I was now responsible for rolling defenses as well. 4th edition alleviated this with probably the best contribution to the franchise yet: fixed defense values for ref, fort, and will. Players may want control over their own defenses, but in truth, all they are doing is gaining a false sense of control by rolling dice. Meanwhile, the GM is laden with far more dice rolling than he should be required to make. Even minions had fixed damage values in order to make the GM's role easier. I, for one, prefer avoiding unnecessary dice rolling, especially in a combat-heavy game. I mean, if you're required to roll your defense against spells, why not do away with AC altogether and make every player and every creature roll for their defenses? If I took anything back from writing my Amethyst Pathfinder game, it was the fact that this mechanic was never addressed. As I've always preached, many games are written for the players in mind and not for the game runners, and I would sure like to meet the GM that pined for the day when he was required to make 20 saving throws for an army of goblins. My last point about reducing die rolls is that it increases the value of character skills as a balance. In Mechton, your skills had a value between 1 and 10, but your attack dice was a d10. Your enemy mirrored that range, so in a scale between 2 and 40, half of that could be decided by skill. If you employ larger dice like d20s, then you would be required to increase the character bonuses to match. Otherwise, you reduce a character's contribution. Then it becomes a crap game more about who rolls the higher value rather than who has the better character. And individual character bonus become insignificant, or at least devalued. What good is your character if he is statistically only slightly better than a commoner? Unless you're writing a game about commoners, in which case, go right ahead. This is Chris from Deus Ex Machina.